So getting into it, how are you, Nadia?
I'm good.
Yeah. And I don't know if our listeners can hear the crinkle of this Sunday Post dispatch, but we had to pull this one out of the woodworks because front page, I see Forest Park basketball court plan follows talk of exclusion. Questions around race have long simmered. This is your work.
Mm-hmm.
Front page.
It sure is.
On the day we're recording, and it is Sunday, February 19th, 2023. Shout out to my girl.
Thank you.
So we're really going to get straight into this. Clearly, we are getting the most live work, arguably the most nuanced work, when it comes to Black activism happening in St. Louis. And we're just so happy to have you on today.
I'm happy to be here. I'm so happy to be here.
All right, so I'm going to start with your bio. Nadia is from Norman, Oklahoma, where she obtained her undergraduate degree in political science from the University of Oklahoma. Nadia is now a PhD student at Washington University in St. Louis, but soon will be transferring to the University of Minnesota's Sociology PhD program in the fall. She is broadly interested in the modern manifestations of racism and colorism, the Black experience, and the roles that sports play in upholding racialized structures in the United States. Ooh, that hit. I almost want to say that again, but I won't. She focuses primarily on the ways in which sport, particularly basketball and football, function as a paradigm for broader racialized dynamics within American institutions, while also examining the intersectional dynamics of gender, class, and body image. She is currently working on a number of projects that include, but are not limited to, her master's thesis, 2 academic publications, and partnering with local St. Louis sports organizations. Lastly, she is deeply invested in subjects surrounding cannabis, racism, athleticism, body image, and athlete activism. Also, Nadia is one of my best friends in fucking St. Louis, so give it up for her. Shout out. So, Nadia, bruh, this bio.
I know.
This goes hard. We gotta break this down. So we're just gonna spend today really getting to know who you are and telling the people the work that you're doing, because I see you every single day, and I see you in I see you in regular form. I see you in the mornings. I see you when we're getting ready to go to the club. But to sit here and actually read your bio on paper, I'm like, damn.
I know.
Damn.
I know. We talk a lot about our work and how it often intersects, but it's nice to sit down and actually kind of dive into what that means. Because I know when we get together, it's always a time to cut up and separate separate from the work, separate from the ivory tower. So this is nice.
Right. So first off, my first question is just, how did you get into sports sociology?
Yeah. So when I initially, was finishing up my undergrad and applying to grad school, I was at the time interested in police contact and, the carceral state and its impacts on Black Americans. But as I started my PhD program, I had realized that, although an important topic, an important subject, it's not only oversaturated, but I think that there's this, there's this highlight, hyper, awareness, hypervigilance of wanting to study Black death and Black trauma. And I wanted to, kind of divert from that. I'm so tired of seeing, every academic paper that's published is on these traumatic experiences that Black communities face. So I wanted to come at it from a different angle, while still studying, discrimination and racism, but also looking at resiliency and how, Black people show up for one another and how we use, positions of that we're placed in or that we have been afforded, minimal, but it's there, and how we use those positions to, uplift one another and, talk about things like Black excellence. And So yeah, it was really just like a preserving my peace. I really just was tired of doing readings and writing on Black Death, and I wanted to switch it up and, look at like things that mattered to Black communities outside of, these traumatic experiences.
Right.
And on top of that, like me and my dad, we always bonded over sports. Huge Sixers fan, especially. So I just kind of like channeled, my relationship with him into my work.
And for those of you guys who are tuning in and can't see, Nadia is wearing a Sixers jersey with the number 3. Who are you representing?
Allen Iverson.
Allen Iverson. Hey. And I think it's so beautiful that you made the active decision to study, Black joy, Black culture, in more of an uplifting and playful way, just because, well, one, sports are so important to us, but two, I remember my first year in the sociology program, just having to do all of these readings about lynching and about segregation and about, things that historically, yeah, they've happened and they have serious impact on us, but like at the end of the day, they just don't define Blackness alone.
Right.
Like,
that's not the inherent Black experience. I think community is the inherent Black experience. I think resistance and resiliency is inherent to the Black experience and is central to our experiences. I don't think that these, although important and although, like you said, have lasting impacts, that is not our only experience.
okay. And then also, let's get into this. So, you're talking about multiple things in sports, not just racism, but colorism, gender, class, body image. For those people who might get, racism in sports, we saw the NFL with their End Racism campaign. We saw the NBA with, they're standing for Black Lives Matter. I guess, how do you see all these other factors fitting in together to make what we see now in sports?
Yeah, I think, again, is like, when we talk about, for example, athlete activism, again, ways of using, positions of power, to some extent, access to money, access to, big companies, and using those athletes, using those positions to, speak about things that matter to them and matter to their community, but also analyzing how, big institutions such as the NCAA, the NBA, the NFL also continue to like forward disparities and forward discrimination, like really points to just the way that like our American institutions act as well. It's almost like a mirror image.
And do you think these sort of things are important to the fans that watch sport, or do you think that this is something that we're not necessarily thinking about day in, day out when we would just want to watch the game on Sunday?
Yeah, I think it's like a little bit of both. It's nuanced because, a lot of, especially when you talk about football, like the fan base is very white. So it really is like you get a lot of people with the narrative of like leave race out of it. Like it's integrated. We see a lot of Black people in these spaces. So it must be like we must have reached like some level of, equity or equality because, when you talk about the NFL or the NBA, it's over 50% Black players, but then you do things like you go and sit in the stands. Like I often go and sit in the stands and I just will listen to the way other fans talk about players, and it's really dehumanizing and it is racialized. So like I think that there's a part of it that people are really just like trying to enjoy a game, but like I'm trying to point to like we can enjoy the sport and still acknowledge that these things are real and alive, and like also find a way. I haven't figured it out yet because these institutions are permeated and they're rich, but I think that there's hopefully like a path where we can understand that we can be fans and enjoy players and enjoy the game while also recognizing that like it's deeply racialized and, athletes are exploited for their work overwhelmingly. So.
Right. I mean, even just like I used to always just feel so bad for athletes when going to games because I would hear all these people just like yelling at them and saying, "You big dummy," or this or that. And there's always these comments about their bodies and what people expect them to be able to do. And it's just like at the end of the day, us as fans are not capable of doing any of that stuff. Otherwise, we would be in the NBA, in the NFL.
Right.
But then all of a sudden, we forget that these are humans just simply doing human stuff.
Right.
And like, I mean, people are mad, like mad when like these players lose a game. Like they forget that they're people. It's just at the end of the day, like people feel so drawn and impacted by it. And I don't know, the relationships that fans have to players, I think sometimes just be a little deep and sometimes kind of toxic.
Yeah, I think it's honestly, this is how I feel about celebrity culture in general, is like this hyper, awareness of celebrities and athletes, and then forgetting that these are, at the end of the day, like these are people, these are not modes of production. These are people that are choosing to do something that they love, at the end of the day for a paycheck, and in often cases, like a big one, when you're referring to the NBA and the NFL, but these are still people. These are still people that are trying to make a living, trying to do what they do. Yeah, I have a lot of feelings surrounding fan base energy, because I know that, like, for me, I can sit back and enjoy a game, but I can also sit back and enjoy a game and, like, very quickly analyze, like, these racialized conversations, especially in terms of, like, commentators. And, if you go watch an NBA game, next week and you listen to the commentators, you'll start to pick it up. But there was a paper that was published on the way commentators talk about Division I basketball players and Division I basketball players that were light-skinned. They were seen as, like, intelligent, or, the moves that they were making, it was words around, like, their mind and how they're smart. But then you start to look at how commentators talk about, like, tall, bigger body, darker skinned athletes, and they're monsters, they're beasts. It's like this very coded, racialized language that, is centered around, like, these controlling images, of black men. And you see it produced in colorism. Like, it's not just like a stark difference between, like, being a white basketball player and being a black basketball player, but it's also deeply embedded in colorism, where, like, light-skinned players are seen as smart and, knowledgeable about the game, whereas dark-skinned basketball players are seen as monsters and beasts, and they're only good at what they do because they're big.
Yeah, and then when they do make an intelligent statement, like such, LeBron sometimes says some pretty useful things, and then they're looked at as like, oh, you should just go play basketball, or you're like the exception. Like, why can't more players be like LeBron?
Yep.
And we all know that's coded. But then I also want to ask, because you also have gender in this, and talking about black men, I totally see this, and I don't think we ever think about the ways that, like, violence can be gendered towards men. Like, even though it might be a system of violence ran by men and controlled by men and supposed to be for men, it ends up hurting them. So I think that's really interesting. But on the other hand, let's take it to women. Because when you were talking about dark bodies, larger bodies, the first thing I thought of was Serena Williams and all of the racism that she deals with. So I guess, what are your thoughts on this with women's sports, or even, like, co-ed sports, for example? Like, do you see the same things happening, or does it look a little different?
Yeah, I see the same things happening. I think it becomes, once again, nuanced, but I think it especially becomes that way when we start talking about women, because I haven't done, any research to justify this. It's anecdotal, but what I notice is that black women, their racialized experience as athletes seems to be, like, especially permeated in white spaces. So white athleticism. So, like you said, tennis. And I guess, when we talk about track runners, especially, like, short dashes, with the way that we talk about, black women that are running in the Olympics. What's her name?
Sha'Carri?
Sha'Carri.
Richardson,
Yeah, and you know, she stepped out in earrings and nails and ran as fast as she could, and it was immediately like, she's ghetto, why is she dressing like this? It's like this very racialized language, but it seems to be so much more permeated in like very white sports, or like where we see more white people in those sports. But even the way that we talk about like black women as coaches, like basketball coaches or like sport commentators, it's really, really hard to get your foot in the door as a black woman within sports. And I think that it's very like deeply problematic, and it makes it like a turnoff. It makes it a turnoff for black women to want to put themselves in these positions to talk about sports, because it's, you know, seen as like, you don't know too much about sports, like you can't, like you're a woman, like. But I think the way that women, like black women, approach like sport talk, it feels very intersectional in the way that I talk about sports. Like, I feel like black women commentators like acknowledge these institutions and these systems in a way that like men don't. I think men are like often quick to like separate like politics or sociology from sport, whereas like black women, I don't think that that's the case. I think this is like something that we often see like as a dynamic.
So I feel like you're talking a lot about the personal being political. You're doing a lot of critiques on gender. You're pulling from black feminism, aren't you?
Always. Always.
Like, shout out to Patricia.
Shout out to my girl, Patricia.
Controlling images. If y'all are interested in the theoretical work, Nadia is quoting some great literature that will be in the show notes. So
yeah,
this is theoretically sound, baby. We back up the things we say.
And it's funny because I pulled like what actually ended up making my final switch was that theory class, and you know, we reread excerpts on the controlling images of black women. So I went and read her book, Black Sexual Thought. And she has like a whole section on controlling images of black men and how that is like so obvious like in the sports realm. And the first person she highlights is Allen Iverson, and I took it from there. So
and look where you are now.
I know.
Okay. And you recently just mentioned Sha'Carri Richardson, and I wanna bring it back to her because she is like, if we want to talk about weed in sports, let's start here. Let's start here. So all that stuff that went down with her testing positive for marijuana and being disqualified. First off, can we talk about the fact that like there are so many drugs out there? Some of them are performance enhancing and legal, aka steroids. And those actually make you better. But I have never smoked weed and thought, you know what?
She should get 2 gold medals for
I
that.
can run faster. I'm stronger.
like to be able to run faster and then test positive for weed, like that's 2 gold medals.
2 gold medals.
In a way.
2.
And then, yeah, like you said, is like there's like Adderall. Adderall is like something that is like newly starting to like come up in the news of athletes using is like that's a stimulant that is, you know, and not to say that athletes can't have ADHD and all of those things, but like it's becoming an issue where people are abusing it and overusing it to perform better because it's not something that's drug tested for.
Wow.
But God forbid an athlete chooses to smoke some weed. So.
And I mean, I'm gonna just ask like this in race, class, and gender, like how do you see that playing out in terms of people and athletes and weed and other drugs?
Yeah, I think that I don't know if I have an opinion on how it plays out. I think for me, it's just simply like, it goes back to like this exploitation piece. And I feel this way about drug testing across, you know, all jobs, or in general. But I think that like, it's this exploitation piece where it's like, we're going to make sure we use up your body as quickly as we can to make us as much money as we can. But we're also not going to give you access to your own body. Like there's no autonomy to your own body. Like you can't smoke, you can't, you know, do these things. And I just don't, I think it really plays into like this piece of like no bodily autonomy for black men or black women, especially when we consider that like the two sports that we're talking about are, again, like at the professional level, predominantly black.
Right. Wow.
So yeah.
Dang. All right. So then I guess with performance enhancing drugs, do you think that there should be more policy around it, or it's like how would we make it so that like it's not just a bunch of black men getting tested for weed? Because frankly, I see tweets from basketball players, and I don't even keep up with the NBA, talking about, yeah, this is like the fourth time I got tested for weed like this week, but it's random and none of my other teammates have got it. So is it really random, or is it along racial lines?
Right. And it also makes me wonder is like, I don't know, I have a bunch of surrounding theories and they can be contested because they're not, based in any kind of empirical work I've done on it, but I do have this theory around like this over highlighting or hyperfixation on performance and like stats chasing. People like to call LeBron like a stats chaser. So constantly trying to beat like these like very, very impossible tasks, which on the one hand, these are why these are some of the best players in the world. Like they are overwhelmingly performing well, but I think that like this culture around like instead of highlighting like the beauty of the body and the way that the body moves in sport, it's like highlighting, performance, and it's highlighting, how many, shots can you take? How many 3-pointers can you make? Because again, I think that is all deeply rooted in how much can these big, industries make money, make a profit, turn a profit. And so I think the issue is that when we get to a point where we're not, overtly hyping up like performance, but rather like focusing on the way like these like black bodies are moving in such a beautiful like melodic way. I don't think that there is a want for stimulants and steroids and things like that, because those are all about performance enhancing. Well, if I do steroids, like I'm going to perform better, which in turn is going to make me more money. I think it's just all deeply rooted in, racialized capitalism. And I think when we move away from that and maybe move into like sport being an art, there's no reason to take a stimulant. There's no reason to take steroids.
Sport is an art. Like I play pickup soccer regularly, and I feel like when I'm out there on the field, it's just so like relaxing. Like there's no pressure. Like I always think, should I go competitive again? But because, it's pretty competitive. Like we play to our best ability, but ultimately it's just such an act of like self-care and self-expression. And you can just see people's personalities just shining on the field. And like, if there was less pressure for athletes to do something like that, I mean, one, it would take the entertainment aspect up even further, because athletes are entertainers.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and I think that there's a piece of it that's also kind of deeply rooted in, homophobia as well, is that like when we think about the fan base for sport, it is predominantly men, and men don't want to talk about how the way other men move is beautiful, or the way that other men perform on the court or on the field is actually like a beautiful sight. The way that like these bodies are able to like exceed, expectations is a beautiful thing. That's why they're there. So like I try to approach sport from like I don't really care about how many triple doubles so-and-so made. I care about, how is he taking care of his body when he's not doing this? And then how is that showing up on the court or on the field? So.
Wow. And all right, let's get into the work you do here. So you're here in St. Louis, and I feel like we always talk about how much we love being St. Louis transplants. Like, it has our heart. And as I read at the beginning of this interview, this headline, front page of the Sunday Post-Dispatch, your work about, basketball and building like courts and things like that with Whereas Hoops. Like, can we just get into that?
Yeah, so Whereas Hoops was created, it was initially started by John Early and Noah Cohen at WashU, and they tacked me on, I would say about 8 months ago as a collaborator, and our ultimate goal has been to bring basketball courts to Forest Park. A park being bigger than Central Park, one of the largest parks in the United States in a predominantly black city, and having no basketball courts is puzzling. And it's very racialized, especially where you consider where Forest Park sits. And it's just really, it's been a struggle. We're we're kind of nearing the end. They're supposed to start working, on construction towards the end of this year. But that's, obviously getting pushback from the very rich, very white community that stays right across the street from Forest Park. But yeah, like I have a lot to say about, the project itself and like what it means to not have basketball, or football for that matter at this point in a city that, is predominantly black. And I don't know, like there's something funky about it, and I think like we can all recognize that. And then on top of the fact that like St. Louis, I just found out, this past week, is that St. Louis as a city, has produced the most professional athletes than any city.
Wow.
And yet has no sports that can be associated with blackness. So it's a weird dynamic. I think it's a very weird dynamic. And then, I went to an open house where, citizens of St. Louis can show up and, have their input on what they want the basketball courts to look like, have their opinions about, where it's being placed in the park and things of that nature. And, talking with the people that are wanting to build it, it's, putting trees up around the park because, the people across the street don't want to have the basketball courts in view. No lights. They don't want lights for the basketball courts. They want noise minimized. They want, they say coded things like they want more security. And so as much as I am very pro putting basketball courts in the park, I am also deeply concerned with what does this look like for policing in the park as well, and heightened policing in the park where we expect, black St. Louisans to gather. So.
Wow. So a lot of concerns in terms of like implementing this. Are you still excited about it? Like,
I'm very excited about it. I think the biggest thing is like getting in touch with the local community, the local black community, and letting them know that like, hey, basketball courts are going to be placed in Forest Park, because that seems to be the issue is that, when I talk to black St. Louisans, they have no idea. Like they don't have any clue that this is something that is happening. Another issue that I, take in is that, when we talk about impoverished communities or black communities, or anything of the like how are black communities of North County going to get to Forest Park without a car? Because public transportation almost drops off completely to connect North County to the city of St. Louis.
Wow.
So
and Forest Park is like right in the middle.
Yeah, right in the middle. Right in the middle. It's right in the middle of like this deeply segregated city.
Wow.
So yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, hey, I applaud you for this because I know this work needs to be done, and there's a lot of difficult questions that you're going to have to like figure out as you're moving forward with this, but the community engagement piece seems really great. So
yeah.
I hope people listening, feel like, you know what, if I want to be a part of this and I'm from here, like, yo, hop in. This is your city. Like, this is your tax dollars, y'all.
Yeah. And that's, public sociology means a lot to me. Publishing and doing, the bullshit that they require us to do, like the bureaucratic stuff. Like, I don't care about that. Like, that's not reaching the public. That's not reaching the general public. Like, we're just a bunch of academics writing for other academics.
Right.
And so it's so important to me to like put my work into practice.
Right.
And whereas Hoops has given me that opportunity, and that's why I'm even more excited about it, because none of my work matters if I'm actually not reaching the communities that, inform my work.
That's beautiful. And you also said, in your bio that you're actually going to be transferring to another university soon that's not in St. Louis.
Yeah.
So I'm super sad about that, but
Yeah,
I'm
me too.
I'm
love
very
this
happy
city.
for you though.
Yeah, I love this city. I think it really was just, I needed to find like a deeper connection with a university. You know, I'm used to going to public big D1 and transferring to like this very small private university. I'm quickly realizing that like was not something that was meant for me. So to go back to, you know, a big public D1 where, you know, there's basketball, professional basketball team, a professional football team, like college teams, I'm really, really excited. I think it's going to do a lot of work for, you know, informing, you know, the things that I want to talk about and write about. I just have to now find a way to get in touch with those communities and, you know, make a difference within those communities of Minneapolis.
Yeah. And I think it's beautiful to like notice that like it's like you're already talking about connecting with the communities and trying to like help them out before you even move there. Like you want to be part of it and you don't want to just come in and just change things.
Right.
And I sometimes just get a little, I don't know what the word is, disappointed, disheartened at the idea of academia being a place where we can be frequently in contact with community without having any sort of pressure, incentive, motivation, et cetera, to actually improve it.
Yeah, it's exploitative. Like, we want to use you for, you know, all of the traumatic experiences that you have, drop in, you know, watch you, interview you, do all of these things, but actually do nothing to give back to your community. Academia, like, I kind of associate it with like mission trips. That kind of is what it feels like, you know, promoting that you're doing something, but you're actually not doing anything for these communities. So,
yeah, I mean, and then I think it gets even worse if he's like, well, I mean, we're both Black women who came from the same program and dealt with many of the same issues of race, class, gender, and experienced the same treatment of people. And
yeah.
it's been rough. Like,
Yeah.
I think there's no need to sugarcoat. I think there's no need to like pretend as if like, even though this work might be our passion, like sometimes it's just so unsafe, so mentally violent, psychologically violent, that you feel like you have to go somewhere else to do what you want to do. So I'm upset that you're leaving, but like seeing you prioritize yourself and still figure out ways to do the work that you want to do is beautiful. And a lot more Black women deserve that chance to take care of themselves.
Yeah. And I think that that's what makes it so like deeply unfortunate is like, again, like this is a private school that is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, brings in hundreds of millions of dollars, and, you know, again, is deeply embedded like within a very Black city. And not only are you guys like producing work on these, you know, on these communities and not giving back, but you're also like hurting like your Black scholars. Like you are not contributing to your Black scholars in any way to like feel supported and feel heard and feel loved. Like I think academia is like this silo of like, okay, well, once you're in academia, like there's no such thing as emotion, there's no such thing as love, there's no such thing as care. And that's not fair because we're still human. And they want us to dehumanize ourselves to fit into like this academic narrative. And I refuse to do that. Like, no, I care about my work. I love my work. I cry about my work. And those things are all real. And I think academia, and I think both of our experiences in the department have been trying to minimize those feelings. And it's just absolutely not fair.
Yeah.
So I'm not staying here. I'm going to choose peace.
Choose peace. Choose peace. All right. And then this has been a really good interview. So I just want to pause and like
Take some time.
we went through it.
I know.
Like we took some turns.
I know.
All right. So I think at this point we're getting ready for our rapid fire questions. So
Okay.
you ready, Nadia?
Yeah, I'm ready.
So first off, what do you watch or listen to when you're elevated?
I'm gonna go off of who I listen to. Always Beyonce. She's always a top 5. What do I watch? I do a lot of documentaries. I'm very typical, a lot of sport documentaries. Those always make me feel good. So,
yeah, that's a good one. Should have expected that one. Nerd. All right, and then when you get the munchies, what snack are you reaching for?
anything with cheese.
Ooh.
Anything with cheese.
Cheese.
Quesadilla, like grilled cheese. Like, I don't know why.
That's good to know.
Yeah, cheese, always. And then something sweet. I always go for something sweet. So,
you know what? You spent a lot of time in Europe, so I feel like I can see it. I can see it. And speaking of travel, favorite place or country you've been high?
Amsterdam. Hands down. Amsterdam.
Yes. 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 Guys, literally, when I just took a recent trip to Europe, a solo trip. It was post-masters, just needed a break. And when I got to Amsterdam, Nadia sent me an entire guide of where to go, what to get, where to buy my stuff, where to get your weed at, because, you know, plenty of stuff is legal there. And the itinerary was perfect, and I followed it, and I left, and I was good.
Yep.
I was great.
And now we're going to take a girls' trip back.
We're taking a girls' trip back. If you guys are interested in going back to Amsterdam with us, let us know, because there's a beautiful black woman hostel out there, actually titled Hostel. Will be in the show notes as well. But it was beautiful. And it's in a black neighborhood too.
Yep.
So, yeah. Black girls can have a good time in Amsterdam.
They sure can. That's why it was one of my favorite spots to go to. I went there way too many times to count.
Goals that your life. Okay, and then how and when do you like to partake? Like, is it every once in a while? Is it more so daily?
Yeah, it's funny because on my way here, I was telling my partner, I was like, do I feel like a fraud? Like, am I a fraud because I'm not someone that, you know, smokes throughout the day and operates their day, you know, smoking? And he was like, no, like, you enjoy smoking, like, you just enjoy it differently. And so I personally, 95% of the time, that's the way that I unwind. You know, at the end of the day, I have my wine, I relax, I smoke weed, I eat dinner, and I go to bed. You know, sometimes I'll smoke in the middle of the day, but usually it disrupts my day because I just want to eat and take a nap.
Right.
Because I think it's just like a, you know, creature of habit. Like, I'm so used to smoking in the evenings, and that's, you know, I eat and I go to bed. But yeah, that's mostly the nighttime every day.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do not want people to listen to every episode and think, you know what? This means I should smoke 25 joints a day. Right. Like, that's not the goal. The goal is to have a relationship with the plant that works for you and also helps you think deeper about yourself and the world around you.
Yeah.
So if you're somebody who smokes once every 3 weeks when you go out with your friends, or maybe occasionally to get to sleep, or you don't smoke anything and you take edibles because you care about your lungs, which I applaud you for.
Me. I think another thing with weed as well is that, like, I feel so, like you said, it's like, it feels deeply intimate. Like, I feel intimate with my work. You know, I don't necessarily work when I'm smoking, but I come up with, like, a lot of ideas and thoughts when I'm smoking. I feel like I'm deeply intimate with food, deeply intimate with my partner, deeply intimate with my sleep. Like, that's just how I see weed. Like, I see it fitting as, like, this really intimate piece of my life.
That's beautiful.
So,
oh my god. And then, what's your favorite way to partake? Edibles, dabs, vaping, smoking?
Blunts, 100%. Dutches, backwoods.
Backwoods?
I know.
Look.
Shout out to Kobe for that one, because he definitely put me on backwoods, but Dutches and backwoods are my favorite. I do love, like, bongs and pipes because I feel like they save my weed. I'm not burning through my weed as quickly.
Right.
And it's really convenient. You know, it takes 2 minutes to pack a bowl.
Right.
So, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, if I just need something quick and easy, like.
Right. I'm surprised you didn't say edibles, because you made me some mean edibles last week. All right, y'all. So literally, we had an episode we did with Aize Jamal Everett, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful person, psychologist, like legacy of the Black Panthers. Like, we went deep into it. And I felt myself greening out for like the first time right before the episode because I had a big ass Rice Krispie treat from Nadia.
I like making them. It's just that, what I told Renee last night, between her and my partner, they both smoke way more than me. And, when they ate it and they came back to me and they were like, these are really, really strong, I was like, yeah, I'm not eating these then.
Sick.
Like,
you're sick. You're freaking sick. But you know what? That was also one of the best interviews I've ever done with a person. So
yeah,
I had my black pepper, had my like hemp extract and CBD stuff, and I was right.
Yeah.
I was right. So thanks for that, man. All right. And then lastly, could you just plug us to, your socials, website, events, just any opportunities to connect with you in the future?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at NJNADIA13 or Twitter, which should just be my name, which is Nadia Jackson-Fitch. I'm sure, you'll provide that.
In the show notes,
Yeah, so.
Cool. All right.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. This was so good. Are we doing a round of applause? That was cute. Hell yeah.
I'm proud of us. Look at us.
Yeah,
we made it.